While the others waited without, Queen Amidala, accompanied by her handmaidens, retreated to her chambers long enough to change into yet another ensemble, this one clearly meant to emphasize her status as leader of the Naboo. She emerged wearing a broad-shouldered cloak of crimson velvet trimmed with gold lace and a crown of woven cloth horns and tassels with a center plate of hammered gold. The gown and headdress lent both size and majesty, and she walked past a wandering Anakin and Jar Jar as if come down out of the clouds to mix with mortals, all cool grace and extraordinary beauty, aloof and untouchable. Irte and Rebe, the handmaidens who had accompanied her earlier, were present again, and they trailed the queen in a silent glide, wrapped in their crimson hooded robes. Again, Anakin looked for Padme and did not find her. "Please lead the way," Amidala requested of Palpatine, beckoning the boy, the Gungan, and Captain Panaka to accompany them. They walked from Palpatine's quarters down a series of corridors that connected to other chambers and, eventually, to other buildings. The halls were empty of almost everyone, save for a scattering of Republic guards, and the company proceeded unchallenged. Anakin glanced around in awe at the tall ceilings and high windows, at the forest of buildings visible without, imagining what it would be like to live in a place like Coruscant. When they reached the Senate chamber, he had cause to wonder anew. The chamber had the look of an arena, circular and massive, with doors opening off exterior rampways at various levels above the main floor. At the center of the chamber, a tall, slender column supported the Supreme Chancellor's platform, a broad, semi-enclosed area that allowed Valorum, who was already present, to sit or stand as he chose in the company of his vice chair and staff. All around the smooth interior walls of the arena, Senate boxes jutted from hangar bays off entry doors, some fixed in place while their senators conferred with staff and visitors, others floating just off their moorings. When a senator requested permission to speak and was recognized by the chair, his box would float to the center of the arena, close to the Supreme Chancellor's podium, where it remained until the speech was concluded. Anakin picked up on all this in a matter of seconds, trailing the Queen and Palpatine to the entry doors opening onto the Naboo Senate box, which sat waiting at its docking. Banners and curtains hung from the rounded ceiling in brilliant streamers, and indirect lighting glowed softly from every corner, brightening the rotunda's cavernous interior. Droids bustled along the exterior rampways, carrying messages from one delegation to the next, the movement of their metal bodies giving the chamber the look of a complex piece of machinery. "If the Federation moves to defer the motion, Your Majesty," Senator Palpatine was saying to the Queen, his head bent close, his voice low in an instant, "I beg of you to ask for a resolution to end this session and call for the election of a new Supreme Chancellor." Amidala did not look at him, continuing to advance toward the Naboo box. "I wish I had your confidence in this proposal, Senator," she replied quietly. "You must force a new election for Supreme Chancellor," Palpatine pressed. "I promise you there are many who will support us. It is our best chance." He glanced toward the podium and Valorum. "Our only chance." A murmur had risen from the assembled as they caught sight of Amidala standing at the entry to the Naboo box, robes of office flowing out behind her, head erect, face calm. If she heard the change in tenor of the level of conversation around her, she gave no sign. Her eyes shifted momentarily to Palpatine. "You truly believe Chancellor Valorum will not bring our motion to vote?" she asked quietly. Palpatine shook his head, his high brow furrowing. "He is distracted. He is afraid. He will be of no help." Rebe handed a small metal view screen to Anakin and Jar Jar and motioned for them to wait where they were. Stepping into the Senate box with Palpatine, Amidala was joined by her handmaidens and Panaka. Anakin was disappointed at not being included, but grateful when he discovered that the view screen Rebe had provided allowed him to see and hear what was happening in the Naboo box. "She's going to ask the Senate for help, Jar Jar," he whispered, leaning over excitedly. "What do you think?" The Gungan wrinkled up his billed mouth and shook his floppy-eared head.
"Me so think this is bomb bad, Annie. Too many peoples to be agreeing on this one."
The Naboo box detached from its docking and floated a short distance toward the Supreme Chancellor's podium, waiting for permission to advance all the way. Palpatine, Amidala, and the rest of the occupants were seated now, facing forward. Valorum nodded his short-cropped white head in the direction of Palpatine. "The chair recognizes the senator from the sovereign system of Naboo." The Naboo box glided to the center of the arena, and Palpatine rose to his feet, taking in the assemblage with a slow, sweeping gaze that drew all eyes toward his. "Supreme Chancellor, delegates of the Senate," his voice boomed, quieting the chamber. "A tragedy has occurred on my homeworld of Naboo. We have become caught up in a dispute, one of which you are all well aware. It began with the taxation of trade routes and has evolved into an oppressive and lawless occupation of a peaceful world. The Trade Federation bears responsibility for this injustice and must be made to answer." A second box was rushing forward by now, this one bearing the markings of the Trade Federation and occupied by the Federation Senator, Lot Dodd, and a handful of trade barons in attendance. "This is outrageous!" the Trade Federation Senator thundered, gesturing toward the podium in Valorum. A lean, wizened Nemoidian, he loomed out of the low-railed box like a willowy tree. "I object to Senator Palpatine's ridiculous assertions and ask that he be silenced at once." Valorum's white head swiveled briefly in Lot Dodd's direction, and one hand lifted. "The chair does not recognize the senator from the Trade Federation at this time." The Supreme Chancellor's voice was soft but steady. "Return to your station." Lot Dodd looked as if he might say something more, but then he lowered himself back into his seat as his box slowly retreated. "To state our allegations in full," Palpatine continued, "I present Queen Amidala, the recently elected ruler of the Naboo, to speak on our behalf." He stepped aside, and Amidala rose to a light scattering of applause. Moving to the front of the box, she faced Valorum. "Honorable representatives of the Republic, distinguished delegates, and Supreme Chancellor Valorum, I come to you under the gravest of circumstances. In repudiation and violation of the laws of the Republic, the Naboo have been invaded and subjugated by force by droid armies of the Trade Federation." Lot Dodd was on his feet again, voice raised angrily. "I object! This is nonsense! Where is the proof?" He did not wait for recognition as he turned to the chamber at large. "I recommend a commission be sent to Naboo to ascertain the truth of these allegations." Valorum shook his head. "Overruled." Lot Dodd sighed heavily and threw up his hands as if with that single word his life had become hopeless. "Your Honor, you cannot allow us to be condemned without granting our request for an impartial observation. It is against all the rules of procedure." He scanned the chamber for help, and there was a murmur of agreement from the delegates. A third box glided forward to join those of Naboo and the Trade Federation. The chair recognized Ax Mo, the senator from the planet of Malastare. Stocky and slow-moving, his 3 eye stalks waving gently, Ax Mo put the thick, heavy pads of his hands on his hips. "The senator from Malastare concurs with the honorable delegate from the Trade Federation." His voice was thick and gnarly. "A commission, once requested, must be appointed where there is a dispute of the sort we have encountered here. It is the law." Valorum hesitated. "The point is..." He trailed off uncertainly, left the sentence unfinished, and turned to confer with his vice chair, identified on the printed register as Masameda. Ameda was of a species Anakin had never encountered, human in form, but with a head swollen by a pillow of cushioning tissue narrowing into a pair of tentacles that drooped over either shoulder and feelers that jutted from above the forehead. Together with their aides, the chair and vice chair engaged in a hurried discussion. Anakin and Jar Jar exchanged worried glances as Palpatine's voice reached them through the handheld viewscreen's tiny speaker. "And to the bureaucrats, the true rulers of the Republic, and on the payroll of the Trade Federation, I might add," he was whispering to the Queen. Anakin could see their heads bent close. Palpatine's tone was heavy. "This is where Chancellor Valorum's strength will disappear." Valorum had moved back to the podium, a worn look on his face. "The point is conceded. Section 523A takes precedence here." He nodded in the direction of the Naboo box. "Queen Amidala of the Naboo, will you defer your motion in order to allow a Senate commission to explore the validity of your accusations?" Anakin could see the Queen stiffen in surprise. And when she spoke, her voice was edged with anger and determination. "I will not defer," she declared, eyes locked on Valorum. "I have come before you to resolve this attack on Naboo's sovereignty now. I was not elected queen to watch my people suffer and die while you discuss this invasion in committee. If the Chancellor is not capable of action, I suggest new leadership is needed." She paused. "I move for a vote of no confidence in the Supreme Chancellor." Voices rose immediately in response, some in support, some in protest. Senators and spectators alike came to their feet, loud mutterings quickly building to shouts that echoed through the cavernous chamber. Valorum stood speechless at the podium, stunned and disbelieving. He stared at Amidala, his face etched in sudden shock as the impact of her words registered. Amidala faced him boldly, waiting. Mas Amedda moved in front of Valorum, taking charge of the podium. "Order!" he bellowed, his strange head swelling. "We shall have order!" The assembly quieted then, and the delegates reseated themselves, responding to Amedda's command. Anakin noted that the Trade Federation box had maneuvered into position close beside the Naboo box. Lot Dodd exchanged a quick glance with Palpatine, but neither spoke. A new box floated to the center of the chamber, and the vice chair recognized Edsel Bargan, the senator from Runa. "Runa seconds the motion for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum," Bargan intoned in a sibilant voice. Mas Amedda did not look pleased. "The motion has been seconded." He turned now to Valorum, speaking quickly to him, keeping his voice low and his words hidden behind his hand. Valorum looked at him uncomprehendingly, eyes distant and lost. "There must be no delays," Axmo of Malastare declared in a loud voice, drawing Mas Amedda's attention back to him. "The motion is on the floor and must be voted on at once." Lot Dodd was back on his feet. "I move the motion be sent to the Procedures Committee for further study." The Republic Senate erupted anew, chanting loudly, "Vote now! Vote now!" Mas Amedda was deep in discussion with Supreme Chancellor Valorum, hands on his shoulders as if to bring him back from wherever he'd gone by sheer force of determination. "You see, Your Majesty, the tide is with us," Anakin heard Palpatine announce quietly to the Queen. The boy's eyes dropped to the viewscreen. "Valorum will be voted out, I assure you, and they will elect a new Chancellor, a strong Chancellor, one who will not let our tragedy be ignored." Mas Amedda was back at the podium, addressing the chamber. "The Supreme Chancellor requests a recess." Shouts rose from the delegates, echoing across the chamber in waves as Valorum stared at Senator Palpatine and Queen Amidala, and even from where he stood watching now at the entry doors to the Naboo box, Anakin Skywalker could discern the look of betrayal registered on the Supreme Chancellor's anguished face. Less than an hour later, Anakin burst through the open doors of the Queen's antechamber in search of Padme and found himself face to face with Amidala instead. The queen was standing alone in the center of the room, her eyes directed toward him, her robed form radiant and solitary. "Excuse me," Anakin said quickly. "Your Majesty." She nodded silently, white face smooth and perfect. "I was looking for Padme," he continued, standing rooted in place just inside the doorway, undecided on whether to stay or go. He glanced around doubtfully. "Qui-Gon says he will take me before the Jedi Council. I wanted Padme to know." A small smile flitted across the Queen's painted lips. "Padme isn't here, Anakin. I sent her on an errand." "Oh," he said quietly, "but I will give her your message." The boy grinned. "Maybe I will become a Jedi Knight," he exclaimed, unable to contain his excitement. Amidala nodded. "Maybe you will. I think Padme would like that." "I think she would too." Anakin backed away. "I didn't mean to." He searched for the word and couldn't find it. "Good luck, Anakin," the Queen said softly. "Do well." He wheeled away with a broad smile and was out the door. The day passed quickly for Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and sunset found them standing together on a balcony outside the Jedi Temple overlooking Coruscant. Neither had said anything to the other for some time. They had collected Anakin Skywalker from Senator Palpatine's quarters following his return from the Republic Senate and brought him before the Council for examination. Now they were awaiting a decision. As far as Obi-Wan was concerned, it was a foregone conclusion. The young Jedi was frustrated and embarrassed for his master, who had clearly overstepped his bounds once again. Qui-Gon had been right in his suspicion that the boy was possessed of an inordinately high midichlorian count. Obi-Wan had run the test himself, but that alone was not enough to demonstrate Anakin was the chosen one. If there even was such a one, which Obi-Wan seriously doubted. There were hundreds of these old prophecies and legends handed down through the centuries as a part of Jedi lore. In any case, Qui-Gon was relying on instinct once again, and instinct was useful only if born of the Force and not of emotion. Qui-Gon was insistent on championing the causes of underdogs, of empathizing with creatures he found in some peculiar, inscrutable way he alone could comprehend significant in the scheme of things. Obi-Wan studied his mentor surreptitiously. Why did he insist on pursuing these hopeless causes? The Council might find the boy possessed of more midichlorians than normal, but they would never accept him for Jedi training. The rules were clear and established, and the reasons supporting them were proven and unassailable. Training for the Order after more than a year of life was doomed to fail. At 9 years of age, Anakin Skywalker was simply too old. But Qui-Gon would not let it go. He would brace the Council once again, and the result would be the same as it had been on so many other occasions. Qui-Gon would be denied, and his stature as a Jedi Master would fall a little further. Obi-Wan moved to where the older Jedi stood, staring out at the endless horizon of skyscrapers. He stood close to him, silent for a moment longer before speaking. "The boy will not pass the Council's tests, Master," he said softly, "and you know it. He is far too old." Qui-Gon kept his gaze directed toward the sunset. "Anakin will become a Jedi, I promise you." Obi-Wan sighed wearily. "Don't defy the Council, Master, not again." The older man seemed to go very still, perhaps even to stop breathing, before he turned to his protege. "I will do what I must, Obi-Wan. Would you have me be any other way?" "Master, you could be sitting on the Council by now if you would just follow the code. You deserve to be sitting on the Council." Obi-Wan's frustration surfaced in a burst of momentary anger. His eyes sought the others and held them. "They will not go along with you this time." Qui-Gon Jinn studied him a moment, then smiled. "You still have much to learn, my young Padawan." Obi-Wan bit off his reply and looked away, thinking to himself that Qui-Gon was right. but that maybe this time he should consider taking his own advice. Inside, Anakin Skywalker faced the Jedi Council, standing in the same place Qui-Gon Jinn had stood some hours earlier. He was nervous at first, brought into the chamber by Qui-Gon, then left alone with the 12 members of the Council. Standing in the mosaic circle and ringed by the silent assemblage, awestruck and uncertain of what was expected of him, he felt vulnerable and exposed. The eyes of the Jedi were distant as they viewed him, but he sensed they were looking not past him, but inside. They began to question him then, without preliminary introductions or explanations, without expending any effort at all to make him feel comfortable or welcome. He knew some of them by name, for Qui-Gon had described a few, and he was quick to put faces to names. They questioned him at great length, testing memory and knowledge, seeking insights at which he could only guess. They knew of his existence as a slave. They knew of his background on Tatooine, of his mother and his friends, of his pod racing, of Watto, of everything factual and past, of the order of his life. Now Mace Windu was looking at a screen the boy could not see, and Anakin was giving names to images that flashed across its liquid surface. Images appeared in Anakin's mind with such speed, he was reminded of the strange blur of desert and mountains whipping past his cockpit during a pod race. A bantha, a hyperdrive, a proton blaster. The images whizzed through his mind as he named them off. A Republic cruiser, a Rhodian cup, a Hutt speeder. The screen went blank, and Mace looked up at the boy. Good, young one, the wizened alien called Yoda praised, the sleepy eyes fixed on him, intent behind their lids. How feel you? Cold, sir, Anakin confessed. Afraid, are you? The boy shook his head. No, sir. Afraid to give up your life? The Dark One called Mace Windu asked, leaning forward slightly. I don't think so, he answered, then hesitated. Something about the answer didn't feel right. Yoda blinked and his long ears cocked forward. See through you, we can, he said quietly. Be mindful of your feelings, Mace Windu said. The one called Ki-Adi-Mundi stroked his beard. Your thoughts dwell on your mother. Anakin felt his stomach lurch at the mention of her. He bit his lip. I miss her. Yoda exchanged glances with several others on the council. Afraid to lose her, I think. Anakin flushed. What's that got to do with anything? He asked defensively. Yoda's sleepy eyes fixed on him. Everything. To the dark side, fear leads. To anger and to hate. To suffering. I'm not afraid, the boy snapped irritably, anxious to leave this discussion and move on. Yoda did not seem to hear him. The deepest commitment a Jedi must have. The most serious mind. Much fear in you, I sense, young one. Anakin took a deep breath and let it out slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm again. I'm not afraid. Yoda studied him a moment. Then continue, we will, he said softly, and the examination resumed.